As an illustrator, he primarily specializes in picture books and graphic novels. He has authored 2 picture books and illustrated many others. His wordless picture book, Theatre of Ghosts, was part of the Parag Honor List in 2023. Parismita Singh is a writer and artist based in Assam. She is the author of Peace Has Come, a collection of short stories, and the graphic novel Hotel at the End of the World. Her children's books include the graphic novel Mara and the Clay Cows and Fat King, Thin Dog. She has edited the anthology Centerpiece, New Writing and Art from Northeast India, and helped conceptualize the Pow anthology of comics. Her publications also include the NRC Sketchbook, a graphic reportage series for Huffington Post India, and a column for Voice of Fashion. She also works on a creative multilingual education project in rural Assam with the NGO Pratham Education Foundation. Our moderator, Somak Ghoshal, is a writer, editor, and educator based in Delhi. He is the author of 2 books for young readers and has written for a range of Indian and international platforms. With that, I now hand over the session to you, Somak.
Can everyone hear me? Okay, great. Welcome everyone to this session. It's a real honor to, speak to our esteemed writers, illustrators today. I think unlike other sessions, what we'll do is we'll put the spotlight on the writers and illustrators first and let them show you some sample from their work, like what it looks like to work as an illustrator, some of the things that they have done in the past, and then we will probably get into a conversation following that. So maybe I'll request Pankaj to start us off.
Hi everyone. So I'm Pankaj Saikia. I'm an illustrator and author. I primarily work in the field of picture books and graphic novels. What I will do is walk you through some of my work and kind of also introduce you to my process and how I go about it and how I kind of found my own language, if I may, to tell the kind of stories that I want to tell, and maybe we can move on from there.
Yes.
So can we have the presentation, please? That's Canato's. Okay. So, yeah. Can we just go back to the first slide? No, first slide. More, first slide. Back. Yeah, that's fine. Next. Yeah, so these are some of the books that I have illustrated as well as written. So Theatre of Ghost and Where is Number 5, the first and the second one, I authored and illustrated. And the rest 3 were written by some other authors, Priyadarshini Gogoi and Resma Thapa Gurung, respectively. And there are other books that I've illustrated, but these kind of fall into the place of, say, within the ambit of illustrating for Northeast or, stories that belong from Assam in particular. And as well as Arna and Aris's Big Tusk is a story based in Sikkim. Next, please. Next, these are some of my works in the field of comics and graphic novels. Next, please. So, what I would like to talk about briefly is that how I came about telling stories, or more precisely, the kind of stories or local stories that I wanted to tell. It all began with me, trying to find images which I can see myself in, or which kind of represented my surrounding or the surrounding that I grew up in, which was Assam. And such visuals were not available in the current literature that I grew up with, mostly which would be comics, Amar Chitra Katha, Tinkle, and many other stuff like superhero comics that was available to me during that time, which kind of was my staple diet of literature. But I really wanted to see visuals where which kind of was representative of my own surrounding, and that's how I started off with doing some this series called Nostalgia series. Next, please. Next slide. So this is a series that I started off, and it was just single images, and most of the images were based on memories from my childhood. And if you look at the first image, you will see a lot of objects that you would find in a regular Assamese household in the countryside, and like a lot of objects, like smaller objects like that calendar that is very specific to Assamese community. Then there's a photograph of Srimanta Sankardev, which is again very specific to Assamese household. So, while doing these images, I was also kind of, I think, formulating or laying down a process for myself to represent like what I had seen, and then like continued on in that same process, and I created a series of illustrations based on my memories. The first image, if you can see, like it's a traditional Assamese chulha, like a kitchen, and the kid is having aloo pitika, like mashed potatoes with mustard oil, which used to be a staple. And the next scene is about, which is again part of my childhood memories, about taking tea for the field workers. Then bamboo grove, and then another one is memory of eating a giant pomelo, the rabab tenga. Next, please. So while doing these singular images, I could feel that there is an urge that these characters wanted to speak more. There was a story behind each single image, and I kind of expanded on them, and I started making short comics. So, and I started posting them on Instagram. So Instagram, I think the format is same now, like still same, where you can just post like 10 images in a row, like if you slide them. And I kind of put myself into a challenge, like I will tell a story with words, and I was using Anglo-Assamese as my medium just to reach out to that particular audience. And the challenge was to tell a story within 10 slides, irrespective of like, and it kind of was a really good practice for me, because I was able to also find kind of the rhythm of storytelling that I wanted to do, and the kind of wordplay, the kind of language that I wanted to bring into my storytelling, which is not the language of the written word, but the language of like how I used to speak, or I speak in generally in Assamese with the people around me, or how kids speak in general. So it kind of set the tone for the rest of the things that I would be doing for some of the upcoming books. So it was all like just uploaded to Instagram, and Canato, who is sitting right here, saw my work, and then approached me to do a few books, which kind of brought me into the children's book section or picture book section. So these are again some images of like multiple comics that I did, which I just published for free in Instagram, and it was really good practice. Like I kind of was discovering how the structure of storytelling for myself, and kind of finding my own language for it. And that's when Pratham Books approached me to ask me to do a wordless picture book. And I had this story which I wanted to make it into comics, and then when the opportunity came, I'm like, it can be done without words as well. And then I just went on and did this book called The Theatre of Ghosts, which is based in somewhat my experience of growing up in the countryside and walking through the countryside at night, and the experience of watching Bhavna, which is the traditional Assamese theatre. Then there's another book, again kind of wordless, because very minimal words were included in this, is Where is Number 5, which was almost done during the same time. It's based on a childhood memory of having a lot of pets around in my grandfather's place. just to sum it up, kind of like I love drawing. So when you are drawing, when I'm doing like, certain motifs and certain images, so which keeps recurring and became my favorite themes. So I realized like I just want to tell a story which would include a bamboo grove. So bamboo grove would be like the centerpiece of the story, and I would revolve a story around it. It kind of became like an obsession. So here's another image from Theatre of Ghosts, which is a nighttime scene within a bamboo grove. Next, please. There's another. This is from Varys number 5. Again, a bamboo grove. You can see. Then I also ventured out into doing comics. Again, based on my experience of growing up in Assam. A bit about my process. So this is how I do, like everything starts with a storyboard, which is like very rough, laying out the plan for the entire, because I don't write, I just, as an illustrator, I'm able to draw like, the entire story out, figure out the pages. This is a very quick, this thing of the, like how one single image is developed into the final one. So this is like this is a rough color block. And then I would do a final line drawing, and then there would be the final image. But if you really ask me, I really like the rough color block. Like as I grow older, I kind of, the rough color block kind of I find more appealing. And this is a recent project that I have been engaged with the, in association with this organization called Ayang Trust, and it's a bilingual magazine in Assamese and English. It's going a bit fast, please. Hold on. So I'm sorry, I'm taking a lot of time, I know. I'll just wrap up.
It's fine.
Yeah, okay. So the magazine is like, just a continuation of what I wanted to do locally in terms of storytelling. And then the opportunity to do this magazine came about, and what I am looking at it, and the team, the entire team of the magazine is to create a platform where we would be able to bring in a lot of local stories, local illustrators, kid-lit writers, authors, and, and kind of bring in newer voices and see like where we can take it in terms of both design, visuals, and because I feel there's a dearth of good, well-designed books or magazine in the context of Assam right now, and that dearth has been in for a long time. So this is just a small attempt, like trying to kind of revitalize the sector or see what we can do with it. So hopefully we are able to do more. So this is more like recent of my work which just came out. It's available at the book fair, and I just wanted to show this because as an illustrator, of course, like you have a certain identity of coming, like say I end up doing a lot of work that is based in Assam or based in Northeast, but then again with the training, like because we are also trained in a way where research becomes an important part of it, and which necessarily means as an illustrator you can tell a story, or as a storyteller you can tell a story from any part of the world. But given the fact that you take care of the research, you take care that you are true to the subject and you are true to the context. Next, please. So just sharing a few visuals. Like this book is based in Kashmir. I had the good opportunity to spend some time in Kashmir for a project, and thankfully that after that project ended, this book came about, and I was like really happy. But then again, I'm very confident in terms of like, I'm very happy in terms of like how the book came about, because my research and my observation that I had the opportunity to do in Kashmir kind of helped me out to create the visuals for this book. And the process kind of remains the same, irrespective of whether you are doing for a particular region, like say Assam or Northeast or any other place. I think it just, as an illustrator, it will just end of the day boil down to how good your research is and how good your observation and how good your contextualization of images is. So yeah. So thank you. I would like to wrap up with that. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Pankaj. There's lots to unpack there, but I think in the course of the conversation, we'll do that. Now, I'll request Canato to talk about his work, please.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Canato, and I am a picture book maker. I currently live in Bangalore. I work with a publishing house called Pratham Books as an art director. And I also freelance as an illustrator and a picture book maker. And And there are a few images that I would like to share with you. Um, yes. So these are a few books that I wrote and illustrated. There's Snip, there is I Love Grey. Asamo Is That You is in collaboration with another illustrator from Arunachal Pradesh, Ogin Nayam, and another book called Afo and I. So these are a few books that I wrote and illustrated. And next. So my current job is art direction. So I work with Pratham Books, and these are some of the books that came out previous year and last year. I work with different illustrators from across India, and of course we have Pankaj, who I've worked with a lot, and Parismita has also worked for Pratham Books. We haven't really yet worked together, but she has done books for us. And I also work with a lot of illustrators, especially and actually across India. But I also make it a point to find illustrators, find new talents, be it anywhere. And I think that's how I also got Pankaj to work for Pratham Books, then other illustrators like Ogin Nayam from Arunachal, there's David Yambem from Manipur. And so I think being in this space, it has been wonderful, finding talents, reaching out, looking, just exploring what the talents that's just out there, and maybe sometimes we kind of miss because it's just so much out there. And so I think I take it as my job and my responsibility to find these illustrators, and I find so much joy and so much pleasure creating these books with very talented people. So that's my day job. And while I'm not doing this, after all this is done, 5 p.m. and I come home, that's when I freelance. And so I create books, I create picture books. And these are some other books that I also, not necessarily based in the northeast of India, but I love picture books. So anything that's interesting that comes my way, I pick them, I pick this project. The first picture book that I wrote and illustrated was this. It was a wordless book, and it's called Snip. And this came out of my research. I was doing my master's research, and I was interning at Pratham Books, and I was looking at what book to create. Then I was looking at books from the Northeast. So I went around asking publishing houses, especially children's book publishing houses in India. And most of the books that I came across, 98% of books were folk tales. They were all just lovely books, lovely stories, but that was the only angle, that was the only window through people read about the Northeast, and especially for children. And I'm like, this is not the only, I also live a very normal life. I also live my everyday life. What about it? I don't wear all these hornbill feathers on my head and go around walking, right? I live my life like very normal. What about those? What about my lived reality? What about my real experiences? And then with my editors, I'm like, I want to do a book that's just normal. And also universal, like just going back to childhood. And that's how this book, it's just about two kids cutting their hair and going on an adventure, right? And quickly, I wanted to talk about something here. So there was this question about so in this book, the kids are alone. And so there were, people asked me, why are they alone? Where are the parents? Where are guardians, right? But I'm like, but I grew up like this, right? Sometimes you come home and then there's nobody and you cook dinner for everyone and just, so I think those experiences, they are mine. They may be new to someone. And I think picture book like this or books like this, when we as creators, as creators, when we do this, we share this new experience with others as well. At the same time, us also expressing our experiences, rather than just maybe just one way of looking at a certain group of people through folk tales and beautiful, colorful dresses and cultural items and things like that. And I think this book is a celebration of your everyday normal life, nothing fancy, but also just real, just normal everyday life and celebrating it. And so these are some images from the book where would be a very typical house from where I come from. So you have your hearth, you have your kitchen, you have things hanging around. Your living room is like this with a window that looks out to these beautiful mountains and clouds and I'm like, this is my reality and I want to show it. And it has nothing to do really with the story, right? Almost incidental. But this is where I based my story. And the story is a very universal thing of cutting your hair, which I think most of us did when we were young, given a pair of scissors. So I think this is how I wanted to tell this story. Yeah, this is also another. And I also wrote another book called Asamo Is That You? This is about monsters, but it has a very interesting storyline going on, but the monsters are all from the Northeast. So I collaborated with another illustrator, wonderful, talented illustrator from Arunachal Pradesh, and we were discussing like what monsters we grew up with. It was not always this Rakshasa and the books that we read in the books that we have. I'm like, I also had these monsters and things that my mom, your parents or your siblings especially would scare you at night. And let's make a book out of this. And then we made a little, scary, not really scary, but kind of, tickling the fear kind of book. And we had so much fun. And we also wanted to use colors that is akin to what we grew up with. And so with lino cut, and it was a wonderful project. And I also wrote a book that just recently won a Meli Gobai Award, this Afo and I. And this is purely out of my experience. I wanted to do something that me as now I live in another city, and it's a whole different experience. And every time I go home, the landscape, literally and also metaphorically, is just changing. Even a 6-month break and you go home, it's different. And so I wanted to bring all these things together and talk about something about change. And this whole book is fully, of course, I've taken artistic liberty, but then having that home in my head, in my imagination, I made this book. And so if you look at it, it's very a little bit of nostalgia as well, of course, and I think it's around October, November is where this cosmos flower is just so much out there, and this book has a lot of this flower, and this was the road that went to my house, and you have in this season you just have cosmos things. So these are some things that I took from my experience, from things that's around me. And so this is how I made this book. So overall, when I'm creating these books, it's always I feel like when I'm doing my book and I'm writing and I'm making it, I'm making sure that it comes from me. I'm doing it not because I saw a fancy book from the UK and I want to do a rabbit that talks and wears. I mean, it's great. I mean, but my book does not have to be someone else's book, right? My character does not have to be Harry and Tom. It can be Canato. It can be, that's, I think, and also it has to be something that since I am writing it, I am sure of, and that, starting with that intent, I think I've been creating, and I would like to create more. So yeah, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Canato. I was just telling him that my nephew, who is 7 years old, has read Snip and was very influenced to try out the snipping part himself. And we really had to restrain him from doing so. Parismita, would you like to talk about your work?
Yeah, okay. So just keep it, and then so it can actually just keep going. Okay, I'll give you an indication, then it can just start. Okay, right. It's such a pleasure to be here, simply to just watch all this, to sit here and sort of look at all these lovely visuals. And I almost feel like despite all the, the little bit of noise and the bustle all around, it's almost like stepping away, taking a step into an enchanted world. And I think that's what the power and magic of just even the visuals, I think that's what their, I think that's what makes their work so special. And I'd like to actually continue along some of the themes that both Pankaj and Canato have spoken about, and what kind of books do you make, right? Where do the books come from? And also to pick up on a very interesting question that Somak highlighted, which is that what is this? When you create children's books, the emotional, how you inspire to get the children's worldview, the emotional space, yeah. So I thought about that question. And I'm not primarily a children's books writer, unlike, I do other work as well. But I began, but I wanted to, I seriously sort of sat up one day and wanted to do a children's book because, and I thought about this question, why I wanted to do that. And I think one of the reasons was that about 15 years ago, I was still in Delhi then, doing all kinds of other publishing work and things like that. I went back to begin work in Western Assam, in the rural areas of Kokrajhar and Chirang district, where I began an education project. And what that, and it was a difficult time for a lot of the children. I was working primarily with children. And it was a difficult time politically. And the children always have joy and adventure in their life, despite all the overwhelming political and social situations that are hovering around them. And I think that's so evident in Hannah's book as well. And but I was I was really a little bit stunned by the kind of circumstances that children are going through, and to sort of, it's a little bit of a cliche to use the word resilient, but that is what it is. So I was in this environment. It was very multi-ethnic, very multilingual, and also very troubled. Right? And what happened then was because I think so much of writing, including writing for children, is also hits and misses a little bit sometimes. So I began a children's work on that region, and then I couldn't finish it. Right? I couldn't do it. So I couldn't take that step into fantasy and wonder that children's books require you to do. So what I did do was I did Mara, which is not based in Assam. So I borrowed, and this is also something we can speak about, So I borrowed a story that I was not very familiar with from a story that I read in a documented book on Tangkhul Naga stories. So I picked up the bare bones of a story. I spoke to people there to make sure that, I was not really, and then I adapted it to an adventure story. So for me, it was a lot of things. One was that it was my own failure at the base of it, that I could not tell the story I wanted to tell. Somehow it didn't work out. Maybe the distance, maybe the circumstances, but I just felt that wonder, the escape, what I wanted for the story was not happening. And somehow borrowing, and I feel like that about, and as women who wear, as somebody, I shouldn't generalize with women, but as somebody who wears other people's textiles, I wear a lot of textiles of other communities. And then, it was also this point for me to say that, okay, I'm going to use a story that comes from another culture that I'm not familiar with. And I'm going there because I'm not familiar with this culture, because I can't deal with stuff that is happening in front of me, evidently, right? So for me, there was all this stuff going on in the background of the book. Of course, it's not, this is just incidental, but since we're talking along so many issues, I just thought it would be an interesting entry point on even the failure to tell stories, So there are two things that happened at that point. One was, of course, I began working on Mara, and I finished it, and so it's a graphic novel. And the second thing, which is also, to sort of bring us back to the question of collaboration that both Pankaj and Canato have spoken about, was then I decided that it may be another way of doing this, maybe to do work with people, work with non-professionals, people who may not have all the requisite art and design and writing backgrounds in our communities, do workshops and see if it's possible to bring some of their stories into conventional children's books forms, right? So I did workshops, and that was another project that we can or we may or may not speak about later. So these are the two things that, so my entry into the world of, I mean, I'm very fortunate in some sense that I've been able to, that I've been embraced in that I've been able to work with with Canato and Pankaj and everyone else, and that I've been able to make a little tiny little space for myself in children's books publishing, because I think it's an extremely interesting space. It has so much potential, it has so much potential for everything. You can tell your political stories, your non-political stories, your everyday, your radical stories, your traditional stories. Like, you can just do everything. And they're there. Children are reading, And as we know, you just walk around the book fair, we understand that children are reading. So I think, I just find this, I don't do enough work in this field, but I find it extremely fascinating and exciting. And I'm so honored to sort of be around people who are really doing very, very, I feel like, groundbreaking work in this. So I'm just going to quickly, so with Mara, some of the, I think I'm already out on time, right? Just 2 seconds, yeah. So we can just go through the slides. So this is just to give you so I've just put down a couple of pages from the book to give you a sense of like the movement of the book. I think it's already out of print, but just to, so there are all these, so I had a lot of fun because I did a lot of these like debates. So there's this Chanva bird who's shot down with a slingshot. And so the figure of the boy with the slingshot, right? So in conservation, this particular kind of conservation debate, it's really seen as a very wrong thing. But then, so we have all these debates on hunting and, of a young person's place in a particular ecology, and all these debates, which was very much a part of the environment in which I was working in Kokrajhar and Chirang. A lot of little kids who know their ecology really well, know their birds really well, also walk around with a slingshot. Right, as opposed to someone who can take a higher moral ground because we've leveled all the forests and we've cut down all the trees and So yes, I had a lot of fun, and also with the woman character, which in traditional stories may very may have a very different role. And so I was able to, so I had a lot of fun with trying to sort of work out a sense of adventure as well as a little bit of subversion in the story. Right? Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Parismita. We have lots to also talk about in that zone. Hopefully we'll get the time. But may I request Hannah to briefly talk about her books?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I think I feel like I'm the odd one out here because I'm not an illustrator and I don't have any interesting slides to show. But then it's really an honor to be among these wonderful illustrators, and given the choice, I wouldn't have chosen any other panel to sit with. So I'll just talk about my 2 books, When Blackbirds Fly and Postcard from the Lushai Brigade. But one thing I have in common with this panel is that my book, When Blackbirds Fly, the cover is designed by Canato here. He did a fantastic job, I think. So how I got into writing, so it was back in 2012. I was doing my master's in Shillong, and that was a time when Shillong was, home to great authors and lovers of literature, I think. So there was a lot of LitFest going on. So during that time, I was introduced to the wonderful world of Northeast writers, and I met them, interacted with them, listened to their talks in these fests. And I realized how they use words and stories to tell, to tell others about their culture, their people, and their history. And then I started having this crazy idea, like, why not do it too? So I was looking for something to write, and as Canato has mentioned, I started writing about something from Mizo folklore. But then it just didn't work out for me, so I kind of left that thought for a while. And one Christmas, I went home, and I was sitting with my mother by the fire. And she told me this story about my grandmother, how she suffered during what we call the insurgency years in 1960s. So my mother started telling me these stories about how my grandmother watched my grandfather being killed during that time, how she had to, raise three kids as a single parent and all the struggles that they had to go through, and how she later developed, depression and mental issues because of all the trauma. And the listening to this was really heartbreaking, and I started thinking maybe I should tell my mother's story. So I started getting my interest in this insurgency years, or what we call Rambuai in Mizo. But then when I looked into stories, when I did my research for this, what I realized was that my mother's story was also my neighbor's story. It was also my stories of close relatives. It was a story of everyone. Everyone had their share of suffering during those years. And when I digged deeper, what I realized was that most of the accounts on the insurgency that we had was political accounts, statistics and documents. There was no story told about the sufferings of the civilians, especially women and children. And then I realized that, this is what I'm going to write about. I'm going to tell the stories of those who did not have a platform to share their experiences. So I started working on the story, and then after that, my manuscript, after completing writing it, my manuscript landed to Sayoni from Dakbil. And after that, this happened. So I'm really glad that this book came out, because I think these kind of narratives are very much needed, because a few years back, I went to this One Lit Fest, and I was on this panel with other historical fiction writers. And 90% of the talk was about partition. Like, I know partition is a great deal, but then there was also a story that I would like to tell. So I got to tell what was happening in Mizoram during that time through my story. And then that opened conversations and dialogues, and I think that is what good stories should do. And Postcard from the Lushai Brigade is about, it's part of the Songs of Freedom series. It's about children's experience during the freedom struggle. And again, this is a very, even though it's my book, I really love it, because I think, as I've said before, histories and stories from that side of our region is not being told enough. And I think it's really important that we open up spaces for these kind of small histories, so to say, into the larger national narratives. And one thing I really love about writing for children is that, especially creating children's stories, is that the way children see the world is so raw and truthful. There's nothing to hide. And I love writing about that you don't have to hide anything. You don't have to cover up anything. And what I do with my work is I like to have young protagonists who are very ordinary. And I think this is the kind of characters that we need nowadays, ordinary characters. And I think young readers need to be reminded that ordinary characters can do extraordinary things, because especially in a culture in today's world, what we see is that this superhero mania is so strong. It has seeped into our entertainment. Everywhere we have superheroes doing superhuman things. And I think what we have to impart to young readers is that it's okay to be ordinary, and then from that you give out empathy, resilience, and those kind of things. And also in terms of language, what I'd like to do is I write about conflict, wars, death for children. But then what I feel is that, we have to trust young readers. I mean, because many a times we tend to talk them down, but they are so much more receptive, especially with serious, what we call serious themes in literature. And I think by making them confront these complex realities of life, we are also at the same time teaching them resilience, how to be kind, empathy, and those kind of things. So that's basically what I do with my work. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Hannah. I think I wanted to actually come in with this question as well. How do you write for children? Does that kind of involve a different skill set basically to do so? And I think I want to throw this question open to all of you to think about, as Hannah said, right, like children, we underestimate their intelligence sometimes, how perceptive, how receptive they are to ideas, especially hard realities. We think that if we shove it under the carpet, they will not reckon with it or recognize it. But to write for children, you have to be sort of honest and open as well. So I think my first question to all of you in general is to probably reflect on, how do you reach a child's consciousness? Is it by, accessing your inner child? Are you doing it through research, observation, talking to other children? What is the way you sort of adopt to present your work to the world in that sense? So maybe whoever wants to take up this question. Maybe I'll ask Parismita to start us off and then we can go around.
Yes. I think different age groups as well. Yeah, right. So, and I'm sort of, since I'm so privileged to be sitting here with so many illustrators and artists, so it's really like, so I think the picture book that Canato showed, like the ghost story, right? So that is a perfect example of pushing the limits. Because sometimes you have children who are very scared of the dark. Right? Like, it's just, oh my God, it's just, then they have nightmares and they create all this of a certain age group, 6, 7, whatever. But so for me, that was like a really good book because you allow children to, and also the thing with books is that it's there, right? So unlike school prescribed textbooks where you're forced to read in the sense, so children, I think with books that are just out there, you can afford to pick it up, you can put it back. It's scary, but you still want to go and pick it up. So for me, that book is quite perfect in the way of pushing limits of a certain age group. Yeah, because it's also, I think, age group specific. How much of, because I think especially like at you have to think of how much they can grasp of like a certain kind of horror or something, which is why I also find Hannah's book so wonderful, right? It's so wonderful because, what I really liked about your book was that, so when someone like me read it, right, I know that bad things are going to happen. Right, I know, because I know, this is, like it's there. Like I know the history, so I know bad things are going to happen. But a child who picks it up will not. But I think what she does so fantastically, she just guides. I think that's the magic. And I don't know if there's really, I don't know how I don't know how one does it, right? But it is that little bit of you do your research. You'll do your research, you talk to children, you also, you work on your own instinct, I think, a little bit. Good editors, Canato. Good editors, good art editors. So there's, I think, for a book to really be successful, sometimes it is wonderful. You tell a story, a good joke, it just works flat on. But sometimes you need this whole, I think, ecosystem to make sure you have one successful book after the other.
Right.
So, yes.
Yeah. Very interesting. I think I'll throw the question to Pankaj, especially to reflect on, the wordless books that you did. In an age when we have children having access to so much moving image and stimulation, there's constant noise and cartoons and this and that and television and social media. How did you approach that project? Like, was it entirely for yourself that you were doing it as an experiment, or was it, thinking of the end reader? How did that work out?
So with the wordless picture books that I've done, so age group, like what Parismita was talking about, is something that I struggle with, because I cannot have this fixed notion in my mind, okay, I'm making this book for this particular age group, and then there would be certain blockages in my head. And so it becomes really difficult, like if I'm thinking in the stones. So the best way for me is just follow my instinct and see, okay, is this so I have this one image, what's next? Like, what's going to happen next, and how, is it a page turner, right? Is it creating curiosity in terms of what is the next action in scene? And that sense of curiosity is like what I'm looking at and trying to build, like a build up, and then ending the whole thing in a kind of a epitome kind of thing. So what was your question again? I'm sorry. Right. So I try not to be very conscious of it, honestly speaking, because if I'm too conscious, then I don't think then I will become very structured and it doesn't work for me as a creator. So I just follow my instinct and just, try to tell stories that I would enjoy listening to, or I would, enjoy looking at. Now, coming back to your question regarding, in the age where there are, we are bombarded with so many visuals and, images, and there's always TV, there's always internet. I always felt like, there's this difference between looking and seeing. So what a picture book does in many ways, because we, like, as an illustrator, I try to invest a lot of emotions or a lot of details into one singular image. And there are stories within stories, like can be like layers of stories within that image. And most of the time, like many times, especially in case of wordless picture books, what happens is like there is one story that you want to communicate, which is right up front in the first visual that you see, and it's communicated. But there are also layers, so you have to give time to it. And with kids, I've seen like they might go like in out of curiosity, like what is going to happen next, and finish the book at one go. But they will also come back, and they will also see like, okay, there's a cat there, there's something else is happening in this corner, there's a beetle there, or there's another insect here. So all those little details they will start finding. And then I have, in my sessions with like kids, like library sessions, and stuff like children come up with like observations that even I didn't see. Like I just put them in like just out of flow of drawing, and they would come and question me like, what is that? Like, why is that? And why did you draw it like this? There was I remember like in one of my books, the book that I illustrated, written by Priyadarshini Gogoi, called Conijos. So there's a basket, and a basket full of like, it's a bamboo basket, and there are like eggs in it. And because I have to sew around 3 eggs, so I just showed it in a manner like, the perspective is a bit skewed. But one of the child was like, no, I think you drew it wrong. Like, the perspective is not working right here. Like, if the eggs are floating. And I was like, I didn't have an answer for him. I'm like, I'm sorry, I will draw it better next time. But then again, like, these are the kind of observations that they come up with. And it's very interesting. And it kind of, what I feel is like one of my job as an illustrator, or, like, just to bringing in while sewing in the details, is to help them slow down and let, like, kind of again teach them to start looking at things, like, yeah.
I think this paying attention is what we are trying to do with children's books. Canato, would you like to add something, especially because your work has a very distinct style, and I feel that it's very refreshing for a child to look at the imagery that you create, the color palette that you use, the texture that you use. Like, I know a Canato book when I see one, and like I would know a Miyazaki, movie, for instance. It's as signature as that. So tell us how you arrived at that style.
Okay. So I speak as an illustrator, but also as an art director, where I'm also working with other people like Pankaj, and that floating egg, I think I also missed. So, but I think, yeah, that's quite interesting when a child takes the book and they make it their own. It's like, and they start telling you what should be the ending, and that's exactly what happens when I always read Asamo, because the ending of the book is very open, right? So, and you also get to know what's going on in the child's brain when I ask them and what kind of answers they give. Some have there's one expression so again, who's the co-creator, sent a video, and this child, after reading the book, said, I knew it. Asamo is schizophrenic, yeah. And I wasn't expecting it, but yeah, so things like that, like they make it their own. I mean, it sounds a little scary, but that's what they made out of this book. So I think for me, like looking at a book as a creator and also as an art director, is I'm also looking at how it is read. What colors am I using, right? So as be it a child or an adult also, when you are reading, according to the way you read, according to your culture, for example, all of us, we read from left to right, right? Most of us. We have the right to left as well, but most of us. So when you are doing this, how do you, as a designer also, how do you let that happen in your page? When a child opens the book, do you want the word to be read first, or do you want the image to be seen first? So if you want the image to be seen first, is there enough contrast? What color are you using, right? So these, like as a designer also, you are also looking at all these things. And this may, when you are reading it, a child may not say, oh, great design, but it is invisible there. And you are also as a creator, also as an art director, and also as illustrators and creators, we are also doing all these things so that as a reader, they get the best out of the book. And I think that is one big responsibility we also take. And sometimes we miss, but we try our best to do that. So in my work, I'm very fond of textures and shapes and things like that. So I try to use a lot, and but also trying to keep in mind that it is a book, and you're also looking at it as something that the reader would also engage with and also get the best out of the book as well. So that's what I keep in mind.
Yeah, that's absolutely. I mean, I think that's where I'm going to now go to Hannah and actually ask her about, you spoke about something very interesting, that how some narratives always get precedence over others, and children don't have access to a wide range of narratives. And you are putting a forgotten history or an erased history into the forefront. So how do you turn history into story, basically, for children, especially when you're fictionalizing it, when you're building a world around it? What are some of the points that you're thinking about? How are you sort of iterating it?
Yeah, so as I've said, I deal with themes of conflict and war, and I think what's important when we write for children, according to my experience, is that we talk about making reading these themes appropriate for their reading. I think it's important to find that that thing which would pique their curiosity, So, and then they started asking the questions, and I think you have to look for that space where those questions will flow in. For instance, in When Blackbirds Fly, my story is based on the bombing of Aizawl in 1966, and one time I got this question in an interactive session I had with school children. What they asked me was, I think you watch a lot of war movies, because this is straight out of a war movie. And then I started telling about this is something which really happened in Mizoram. So I think that's the way to deal with these themes of conflict and other complex themes. That tickling their curiosity and then making you ask the questions, and then you go on to tell them that instead of just putting it out there for them to directly see it. Yeah.
Right. I think children's are some of the harshest critics we know. They will not persist with a book like adults, even if they're bored. Even if they're slightly bored, you have the risk of losing them, and there your audience is gone. They'll not stick on, basically. I think at this point, I'd also invite some questions from the audience, if you have any. It would be lovely to hear from you as well. You can just raise your hand and we can call you out. No questions? Okay, there's one there, and Mary also has a question. There's a microphone right next to you. Yeah.
Hi. So I wanted to know something, that when we're looking at children's book, for example, when I was growing up, often children's books would equally become an escape from the reality that you are in. What I was thinking of when you just spoke about, Hannah, you just spoke about how conflict is being put, or how it's being dealt with in the children's narrative, or even otherwise, when the topic is slightly, for lack of a good word right now, dark probably. Right? Things that your parents would ideally not discuss with you, but there were so many things I picked up from books. I remember, and then later my parents would be, which book did you read it in? So when you're negotiating that space, where you're writing about conflict, you're writing about something that's probably dark, or sometimes even something that's mundane, what is that one thought that's there that, okay, how exactly do I maintain that fine balance though, where it doesn't cross a line, or is that the thought even in the mind? Because now, like, from when I was a kid to now, when we look at kids right now, because you're writing for kids right now, there's a lot of sensory videos and everything that they're already subjected to. I mean, how much control can you really have over a kid? That's a constant debate that goes on, right? Like, social media, YouTube, everywhere. And then you're talking about a topic which has happened, like in your instance, you're talking about a part of history which is true, which has already happened. So are these like actual thoughts in your head because you're writing at the end of the day for an audience which on one hand knows so much more than us and on average day, but on the other hand can sometimes know absolutely nothing about history. And yet the topic is not like simple. Like it's not about fairies, it's not about all of that. Sorry if it's a slightly convoluted thing, I was just speaking
Right.
as I was thinking.
And the question is for Hannah, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you so much. I don't know what's the writing process of other writers, but for me, when I write, I don't think about writing for children, as in I don't filter my content, I don't filter the language. I just write what I want to express. So I think because, as I've said before, many a times we tend to, underestimate children's ability to grasp the complexities of life. And I, for one, do not know where to draw the line between what would be safe for children, what is not safe for children, what is appropriate for their reading, because children's mind is an enigma. Sometimes they fully understand what you think they might not understand, and sometimes they don't. So what I tend to do is I just write freely. I don't really filter it and say, oh, I'm writing for children, so I should leave this out. I shouldn't use this language. I think there is just that, writing by instinct. And then also I'm fortunate to have a very good editor, Sayoni, here. So yeah, that's how that works for me.
Thank you, Hannah. Anyone else would like to take it up, and then I'll come to the other questions, because it's an interesting thought. How do you sort of censor yourself, or do you at all censor yourself on some topics? Any of you would like to continue that thought? Yeah.
For me, I think when you have a book, a story that you are telling, I think the story is the hero. And so whatever else it is, I think the story stands. And in a lot of, I think especially right now, we have a lot of people making lots of noise about maybe there's certain things. Actually, even about diversity, right? In India also, we're talking about diversity. We're talking about, there should be representation and all these things. But all this without intent, without it. If you're writing a story, but if you're just writing because you want to talk about make noise about a certain thing, I think you have already failed. And as creators, as storytellers, I think the story is the hero. And if you are telling a story and it is maybe about conflict, it could be about about something different, about a different culture. But if your story is great, because you are a storyteller, it could be visual, it could be with text, in whatever form it is, you are telling a story. And I think if you have told your story well, if you're good at what you do, I think it will stand for itself. And whatever is comes along with it, I think that becomes a part of the story. And for me, I personally believe that, and that's how I would also like to, maybe even if there is something that I want to talk about, also it should not overtake my story. So I think that's what I believe in.
Yeah. Thanks very much. Yes, Mary, you wanted to ask something.
Thanks so much. I think there's just so much wealth in everything that you've shared, each and every one of you, and such different perspectives, different insights that you've brought in. So I'm just feeling so overwhelmed by what I've learned from each of your works. There's a question I'm asking you as a person also from the region, who is also programming a lot in the region, and it's something that actually for me is a bit of a dilemma. What do you think of the folktale? Because I think this is thrown at us so much, and what do you think of it in the perspective of placing it in the children's story space? I'd love to hear your thoughts on it.
This is a general question to the panel, right? Okay, so everyone gets to speak.
I'll just quickly, I love folktales, and I also read folktales, and it should be there. My only thing is it should not be the only thing out there. And I think people who are retelling it or remaking books and illustrating it should do it. And And you should get the best writers and illustrators to create and make wonderful stories. But along with that, this should not be the only way or only thing that comes from a certain area or a certain place. That should not be the only thing that people know about that place. And that's what I feel. Yeah.
Maybe Parismita, you can continue.
So for a long time, actually, thank you for the question, Mary. Because I think for a long time, I really resisted this. Because you were just expected to show up and it's basically, we've got coded in such a way, right? And I keep going back to textiles because it is a part of that whole ecosystem of framing who we are, especially when we are in Delhi. Okay, but this is how it goes. So, but with folk tales, I think now I've come to this point where I am like Canato said, I love reading. I love it. And but the thing is that I've been thinking about it for a really long time, and the thing to I think really bear in mind also is that when we are when we are looking at an oral when we are looking at oral traditions, that moment of transcription is very deadly. Right, the person, so if you're just hearing the story, every person can do a retelling. Like each time it is fantastic, isn't it? That each time you tell the story, it is a book. It is, you are literally doing a retelling. But that moment of transcription is, I find that moment, now I'm beginning to get very fascinated with it. Because many of our folktales have been transcribed by colonial records, by people who may have not known the language. But now there are also a lot of people doing very good work and it's really a thankless job, this whole transcribing of folktales and all of that. So I think, but yes, we have to be careful, respectful, of our sources. I use them a lot, and I'm always, I do this with really cognizant of the risk at the heart of doing this.
Yeah, I think what all my fellow panelists have stated in all their wonderful insights is that we tell the kind of stories that we want to tell. So just because we're from the Northeast doesn't mean that we have to write about folk tales and conflict. Even I write about conflict, but that's not because I'm from the Northeast. It's because the conflict has something very personal to do with me. It's my mother's story, so that is why I write. So I think there has to be we have to allow this universality. I'm from Northeast. I can write about conflict, folk tales, and I can also write about love, murder, thriller, anything. I think that should be it, yeah.
Right. Pankaj, would you like to add?
In context of rewriting, presenting folktales or writing folktales, one thing that I've always struggled with is so once I was in this academic discussion that was going on, and there were, the discussion was on folklores and the topic was how to sanitize folklores for younger kids. And the most important question that came up, the first question that came up, first of all, who decided these are for kids or, for a particular age group? And number two, why do you need to sanitize them? Because they themselves kind of are repository of a certain cultural ethos, a cultural knowledge base, and maybe biases and whatever. But at the same time, they need to be looked at in a certain way. That being said, there's also another aspect, as a storyteller, I'm really, really interested in folktales, and I would really love to, in my own stories, want to bring them in and, use elements from, which again, if you really look into a lot of aspects of folktales, they kind of also represent a lot of collective unconscious, or collective imaginations of the people. And there's really, I feel there's a lot of opportunity to work in there. But at the same time, what I feel stories have a life of their own. They know one story stays the same, and over the years, and the story can evolve from each, based on how each storyteller tells it. So within the present context, if I were to pick up a folk tale or take elements from it, I would really want to do it in a manner which would recontextualize and and speak kind of in a more contemporary terms and to a more modern audience, but at the same time not using sanitizing it as such, but bringing it all. Yeah.
Well, I think we are almost out of time. There's one question, but can we make it quick, please?
exciting, and I read some of your work, so I'm very happy to hear the panel today. I also feel, in the light of the discussion, because I teach university kids, and even Hannah, you also teach at college and university, I sometimes feel that children's books can help us with, because not everybody, with all this infotainment and digital world coming up, nobody likes reading big textbooks anymore. So if I am trying to discuss context of conflict, like in a sociology class about ongoing, whatever is happening in Manipur, whatever is going on about genocide and all of that, sometimes they also need certain simple language. And these times, I think those kind of things help. I'm not only talking about children's book, but even like graphic novels. So I use a lot of these kind of things because sometimes we are dealing with students who are not interested. So I want you all to just tell me how would you think of using children's books in classrooms in any age across?
I think we are really running out of time, unless you want to quickly answer that question, and maybe you can continue the conversation after the session too, but if just one quick word.
Yeah, that's an excellent suggestion. I wish our universities would buy books. Like, just buy all our books. That would be fantastic.
All right. Thank you so much for this conversation. It was a real privilege to be on this panel. Very happy to be here today. Thanks.
Thank you so much. I mean, this was an absolutely fabulous session, and like Mary said, there's a wealth of information that we're taking away. And I'd now like to invite the BLF co-director Raman Shrestha to present our speakers with some festival mementos. And all our panelists' books are available at the fair, so please do purchase them and get them personally signed. All the books are available at the French Institute of India stall, thanks to Kunzum and French Institute of India. That's at hall number 4, stall J04, and it's diagonal and right at the other end, but please do pick them up. I'd now like to also Can we please have a big round of applause for everyone on the panel for an absolutely wonderful, wonderful session. I'd now like to invite my colleague Mary to introduce the next session, which we'll start in just a few minutes.
And now, from the people who are making books to the people who are publishing books, the next session is on publishers and publishers from the region and the role that they play in nurturing and promoting literature. I think we are dot on time. The name of this next session is, sorry, I'm just organizing my sheets. Publishing with Purpose, independent publishers on their vision, their books, and the market. We have representatives from different places, some young, some old. Abhiruk Patwari, Raman Shrestha, Vishu Rita Krocha, moderated by Tisa Guha Sarkar, May I invite you please to come and take your seats at the stage? And to introduce shortly each speaker and the moderator. Raman Shrestha is a bookseller, publisher, innkeeper and events curator at Gangtok's Rachna Books, a bookshop started by his family in 1979. He has grown Rachna Books into a space for creativity and literary culture in Sikkim. A speaker at many literary festivals, Raman has been a part of the British Council International Publishing Fellowship. He also co-directs a Rachna Books Writers Residency. Chuben Kabino's Song of the Soil, a book published by him, was shortlisted for the JCB Prize for Literature. He is the co-director of the Brahmaputra Literature Festival. Under Raman's watch, Rachna Books has become an integral part of modern Sikkim's cultural identity, particularly for the youth. Vishu Rita Krocha is a poet, journalist and author from Nagaland. She has authored 3 collections of poetry and a collection of folk tales, besides co-authoring several other books published by Zuban, Sahitya Academy and Rutledge. She is a recipient of the Kohima Press Impact Journalism Award 2022 and a National Foundation for India Media Fellow in 2021. Her writings have appeared in several publications including The Hindu, Indian Express and Murung Express. In 2021, she was part of the first cohort of the US Consulate General Kolkata-led Academy for Women Entrepreneurs program. She founded Pen Thrill, an independent publishing house in 2013, which has been instrumental in discovering literary talents from the Northeast, especially Nagaland. Do we have Abhiruk here? Abhiruk, are you here? Oh yes, oh just in time. So Abhiruk, please come and take a seat on the table, on the stage. Abhiruk Patwari is a multifaceted creative professional and entrepreneur with a passion for innovation in the arts and literature. He is the director of the Reeds Factory, a renowned independent publishing house in Assam, and the founder of Abstract Reality, a Delhi-based multidisciplinary production house that brings together diverse art forms from music and film to visual storytelling. With a decade's experience in various creative fields, Abhiruk has led multiple nationwide music tours and earned global chart recognitions for his work. And to introduce our moderator today evening, Tisa Goa Sarkar has worked in the publishing industry for 15 years, most recently as editorial director at Pan Macmillan India, from where she published many best-selling and award-winning titles. She is currently an editorial and publishing consultant based in New Delhi. And with that, I hand over the session to you, Tisa.
Welcome. Can you all hear me? Okay. Welcome Abhiruk, Raman and Rita. This is the second panel I'm moderating today, and this is also a panel that's very close to my heart. For 15 years, I worked for mainstream publishing houses. It was, most of those years were very rewarding, but always there was a small part of me that would feel a bit unfulfilled. And I think it's because I didn't get to experience the joys of working as an independent publisher. Because, to me, I've watched the work independent publishers in India and around the world have been doing, and I can see that they influence literary culture, reading cultures, and therefore culture in general in ways that the big MNCs might never be able to. They take chances on untested voices. They are able to preserve as well as disseminate regional narratives. And they build ecosystems, where books are seen as more than just products. So, independent publishers take creative risks in commercially challenging circumstances. So I also think that independent publishers face more hardships than any other, than their counterparts. So I wanted to ask all of you if you agree with this version, if you relate to it, and if you can tell us about each of your publishing houses, what motivated you to start them, and what drives you to do the kind of work you do. Shall we start with you, Raman? And we'd love to hear a little bit about Rachna Books.
Hi everybody. Good afternoon. So I run Rachna Books, which has been a bookstore for a very long time, and as a bookseller over the years, there was always some sort of a sense of a gap that needed to be filled, and there would be books that would be published, the researches that would happen, and those books that happened on our region would not be available in our region. That was one of the main reasons why I thought we should start publishing. But also as a fiercely independent bookshop with our own worldview, it was, I think, perhaps only natural that our ambition would be to also make a few books which didn't seem to be existing.
Absolutely. Rita, did you have similar motivations when you decided to start Pen Thrill?
Yeah, so I grew up thinking there is no future for somebody like me because nobody talked about writing as a profession while I was growing up. And so I was kind of lost what I wanted to become in the future. But I did love writing, and English literature was the obvious subject to take up. I did my BA in English literature and then studied journalism, which is how I got into journalism and started contributing articles and poetry to the local newspapers in Nagaland. And so after doing that for a couple of years, the NEZCC came forward wanting to publish my collection of poetry and my sister's as well. So that sort of introduced me to the world of publishing. And even when I ventured into publishing, I knew very little about publishing, the process that goes into it. I had zero knowledge about business, and I had literally no resources with me to start a publication house. But it was, I would say, my sheer love for books, reading and writing that led me into publishing, and that is still the motivation factor that drives me till today.
That's very inspiring to hear. Abhiruk, why don't you tell us a little bit about your independent publishing house, which I think is the youngest here. Yeah. When was it that you started the Reeds Factory?
I started Reeds Factory at 2020. But music and art and everything has been a very integral part. My mother being a writer as well. And throughout my musical journey and whatever the artistic endeavors I've been a part of, there I've met a lot of people very passionate about this thing and always have been very interested in the production of things, be it everything that's related to art. So Reeds Factory, I started because I wanted to create a space for anyone who wants to express art without thinking much about the commercial appeal. That is for us to figure out, so that the artist can take care of the art. Yeah.
That's a great answer. So I now want to dig a little deeper into each of your publishing houses. So Raman, I'll come back to you. Everything I read about Rachna Books tells me that it's really grown far beyond a bookstore. It's become this space that it's become a cultural and literary hub, a place that fosters community. How did that come about, and what do you think is the relationship between publishing, book selling, and community building?
Well, for the kind of place where I come from, when I restarted my family bookshop, which had been closed for many years, it was, the idea was to have a community space. And this was this was 23 years ago. I mean, we weren't even talking about co-working spaces and things like that. We, as a small mountain town, we needed a space where youngsters could come. So the idea was very much whether a community was built around the bookshop or not, but the bookshop was built to have a community come around, A couple of years down the line of book selling, I realized that what I hadn't bargained was that to be seen as the town's agony aunt. There would be people who would come, and the relationship kind of began to be built in a way that if somebody lost a dog, or had a fight with a father, or some trouble in their life, they would come and they would pour it out to the bookseller over there, the guy behind the counter. So all that was happening, but it was also all a very good sign that yes, people were slowly beginning to own up this space, and over the last 2 decades, it's become kind of a space where I think my job is to open the shutters in the morning, close it in the evening, and be the caretaker there. But the community has owned up that space, and taking that further with the cafe that we have, and what we then we started the writers' residency, which has been a huge success. As you listened to Pema yesterday, a comic book has come out from our first residency. So that was aided because I was also a publisher already, and looking at stories like this, stories from our spaces that needed to come to be made and to be published. So I think in the end, I mean, it's not the end, but when you think about it in a way, if you look at it from a little zoom out way, you do see that everything is just cohesively working with each other. The book selling, the community space, publishing, stories are coming. I mean, a lot of stories are being told over teas and coffees every day. So it's just a space where a lot of stories, I mean, I'm peddling books, but the stories are floating around by itself.
Which is clearly a sign that, this place inspires comfort in people, and what better place than